Hi everyone, in this video we're going to talk about an idea that will quietly shape everything we do in this course. The difference between history and myth in STEM. When we hear the word myth, right, we often think it means something that's completely false. But here, myth means something more subtle, more powerful, like a simplified story that feels true even it leaves out critical context. So if we think in this way, in this lens, STEM history we can see is full of myths, not because people intended to mislead or falsify, but because stories are shaped by power, by access and repetition. And what we mean by history is that history is, first of all, is not a perfect record of everything that happened. We all know that, right? History is biased. Is what was documented, preserved, and legitimized. So to appear in STEM history, someone usually needed access to education, the ability to publish or patent, institutional affiliations, recognition from peers, and if someone didn't have access to those systems, like women did not have those access to those systems, their work often disappeared, even if it was essential. So that's why we can say history reflects who had access. Let's look at some common STEM myths. One common myth is that discoveries are made by lone geniuses, or science is purely objective and merit-based. If women were capable, they would have been present, or absence equals lack of interest or talent. So when women don't appear in historical narratives, then the myth becomes they weren't there. Instead of historical reality, they were excluded. They were undocumented. They were uncredited. Do you see the difference? So this shift matters a lot because understanding this nuance is very important because it changed how we explain the inequality. And why this matters today, first of all, we can all agree the history is not neutral, right? It reflects power, as we said, access, the values. Okay, agreed so far. You may be wondering, then why do we care what history wrote about women in science and engineering? And who do I care? And why do I care who wrote this history? Understanding this is very important because history doesn't just shape what we know about the past, it shapes how we imagine the present moment, the current moment. One important concept to learn is archival bias. So what is it? Archival bias reminds us that the historical records preserve some voices and erase others. Like narrative that was once a historical record or an archive now becomes an engineering standard, and engineering standards that rely on historical data, educational norms, and super relevant to our era, training data for AI systems. AI systems, as we know, are trained on historical texts and records. If women are erased from history, then they're missing from datasets, they're missing from design assumptions, they're missing from default user models, and that's how historical bias becomes a technical bias. Do you see how it's connected? So I want to reframe our discussion as history is not just the past narrative. Instead, it's the data set that we keep reusing, the models we keep training, the biases we keep introducing. This is why here we're not just studying women in STEM as a historical issue, but we're looking at this issue from a systems thinking perspective. Specifically, we're studying how systems inherit bias, how does design choices encode assumptions, and how AI can amplify or challenge inequality. As you move through this course, I want you to keep thinking and asking these questions. Who is visible in history? Who is missing? And what systems shaped that absence? See you in the next video.